All right, well, looks like we got a couple that are just starting to file in. For those that are here early, I do know that we're going to get started in around 2 minutes. We're just going to give some others a second to jump in here as well. For those that are here on early, just know that you'll be muted and that there is a Q&A or chat box that you should see on your Zoom panel. Please do ask questions throughout the webinar. But we're going to wait just a minute or so for some others to join us today. All right, looks like a bunch are filing in right now, guys. Thanks for joining us. For those that just jumped in, just letting you know, we will get started in just around a minute. If you are just joining us, know that you will be muted. Your video is off, but there is a Q&A and a chat box for you guys to interact with us. And please ask the questions throughout the webinar. We will do our best to actually answer them during the conversation. If not, we'll do it at the end. In worst case, we'll add it as part of the recording when we share that back with you after the webinar is done. But just in around 30 seconds, we'll get started. Okay, as we wait those last couple seconds and just the last couple of folks are joining, I'll do one last check. Thomas, Casey, you guys can see my screen and you guys are all good?
Good, thank you.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, we've got everybody on here. So thank you all so much for jumping on and joining us today for this webinar. We've got a really exciting topic, as well as some really special guests. And I'll get to them in a second. For those that did join us late, and apologies for the third time mentioning this for those that joined us early, you guys will all have your video off. You will be muted, but there is a Q&A and a chat box for you guys to ask questions throughout the webinar. I'll do my best to watch it. I'll probably bring up some of the questions if they're relevant during the conversation. Worst case, we'll address them at the end, and if not, at the recording. And yes, this is being recorded, so if you do have to jump early, do know that you will be followed up after this webinar with the full recording and, of course, our contact information. But with that, let's jump right into it. And really exciting topic today because I've been having this conversation with a lot of manufacturers and most recently with dealers and integrators within the AV industry. And that is around this topic of this constant shift within the digital transformation that they're going through as a company to go from products to delivering outcomes. And I asked myself, and of course asked Thomas and Casey, who I'll introduce in a second, how can this really be executed? Because it's a nice thing to say that I want to move from products to outcomes. But one of the ways that we can actually accomplish it is through licensing and license management. And we're going to talk about this in the context of the AV industry specifically, and most excitingly, not just talk about big picture items and imagery, but actually get into the how, what, where, when, and why. So really giving you guys some insights onto how to accomplish this. So quick introductions. Hopefully most of the folks here on this webinar know who I am and know who Excite is. If you don't, my name is Andrew Gross, and I run our global sales team here at Excite, and I run our US office right outside of New York City. For those who don't know who Excite is, in a very high level, what Excite has done is created and launched the world's first cloud standard, mainly first in this AV industry, but of course outside of it as well, and created an ecosystem for manufacturers to connect products and devices to this single cloud, allowing channel partners and dealers to better monitor and manage and support them, and of course, giving real hands-on enterprise IT customers finally the ability to see a single pane of glass and manage rooms, these outcomes and solutions, instead of individual products. But I do want to focus mainly on our two special guests. So let me hand the mic over to them, and let me introduce to you Thomas and Casey from Cliff Consulting. Casey, you want to please introduce yourself, and then you can hand it off to Thomas. Oh, looks like we lost Casey. All right, well, Thomas, I see you're with us. So why don't you start off then, if Casey's starting to rejoin.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Schluep, co-founder of Cliff. Cliff, we are a boutique consulting firm that is specialized in helping OEMs to transition from the traditional way of products that are being put into the market into cloudifying these products. So from a technical standpoint, from a design standpoint, all the way into the connection part. My background is on the technology side. I focus on technology and technology transformation. Spent the last 25 years in sensor and sensor system integration, focusing mainly on human machine interface, HMIs. Some of the key challenges I've seen over these 25 years is, number one, knowing where the systems are finally installed, the location. Second challenge, warranty track and the actual problems that could occur in the field. So the correlation between the actual situation that happened and the products that actually came back. Is it actually a product that was there? Was the application, did it match up? And the third part, and that's specifically on the HMI side, as soon as we hit the human element, it's not always predictable what's happening or what the human is doing. So there's always a lot of, especially in launching a new product, adapting some of those products. So the system upgrades very often are extremely costly. Either if it's already rolled out, you have to send technicians out there, or you have to get the equipment back into the factory to do those upgrades. And so the Excite platform now allows us to visualize, to connect all these dots, and as we going to hear later, reduce the cost involved in maintaining and supporting that.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. And it looks like perfect timing because Casey just jumped back on to join us. So Casey, you didn't miss anything, but I think the audience would love to hear a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure, and apologies. I'm sitting in the middle of Los Angeles at a big corporate office complex, and I have the worst connectivity I've ever had since the 90s. My name is Casey Castile. I am very excited to be here. I am the co-founder with Thomas of Cliff Consulting, and I really operate as a fractional CMO for our clients, covering everything from branding and marketing to really holistic digital transformation. That's the brunt of our business at this point, which is one of the reasons why we're just so excited to be able to partner with Excite and to help bring this new standard to all various industries, really. And my background is in digital branding and marketing, over 25 years of experience, but I also have a touchstone to the AV industry through a deep recording industry experience. I've been a musician all my life and worked in Hollywood, have a music industry background. So I've had my share of troubles with license management. Some of you may be familiar with an iLock device. I'm glad that we have other options now.
Absolutely. So you guys definitely, I mean, maybe not the way that we define AV today, but you've got a lot of AV pedigree, that's for sure, from an audio and a visual standpoint. And you know what, that goes true with this industry because we've seen it just evolve even just over the last 5 years from AV to IT, from IT to UC, and then to the general technology space. It's affecting all of us. So thank you both. Couldn't be more excited to have you guys join us and share a lot of your insight and experience with this. I did want to quickly note, even before we kick off, it looks like the Q&A box in the Zoom may be a little bit broken. So guys, if you do have questions, just use the chat box. I have that monitored as well. You guys can just chat us right there. I'll keep an eye on it. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. And before I let Thomas and Casey take us through the how and what and how to do this and find a way to deliver solutions and outcomes instead of just products, I did want to kind of set the stage. For those that are either new to this industry or maybe have been stuck doing the same thing in this industry and are looking for ways to shift things and to shake up the ability to find new revenue opportunities, clearly in this industry, everybody is looking for growth and everybody is looking for new opportunities. They're asking yourselves, how do I beat the competition? How do I win more business? How do I sell more boxes, make greater margin? We're all in any part of the value chain asking ourselves these exact questions. And really in the AV space, we've done this more often than maybe other industries because we have a very legacy way of doing business, which was I make a box, I sell a box, somebody integrates that box. And you know what? I then wait until that box is out of date and I sell them a new box and I integrate that new box and put that on repeat. But there obviously has to be a better way. And I think a lot of us recognize this. And clearly we did recognize this several years ago when this idea of AV as a service was initially brought up. And I'm sure a bunch of you in the audience are rolling your eyes okay, I've heard about AV as a service, it failed. And I agree. But the question was why, right? And I think one of the reasons, or one of the main reasons why, was when we were first talking about as a service and what it meant for the AV space, is we looked at how it was applied to other industries, right? We thought of SaaS, like Salesforce, I'm subscribed to a software platform, or platform as a service, like AWS, based upon what I consume. Even Tesla and Apple and how they deliver their hardware as a service, they were all great reasons to look at the opportunity here in the AV space and say, well, we can do the same, right? So where did we go wrong? Well, I think through AV as a service, historically just over the last 5 to 10 years when it was really first been introduced, it's been positioned as a growth opportunity and a way to differentiate and meet the new needs of the customer, but it's been defined and executed incorrectly because the focus was always on this word of subscriptions or rooms in a box, bundling software and services and hardware into one thing and selling it as maybe a monthly purchase to the customer. And don't get me wrong, that can be done very successfully. But the problem with just defining AV as a service in that manner is that you ignore the fact that there's a complex value chain in this industry that isn't going anywhere and cannot be left out, especially from a manufacturer through dealer to end user chain, is that when you introduce something as a service and you want to bundle things in an integrated space, you begin to have things fall through the cracks, whether that is the person integrating it is not incentivized. You have to engage with multiple partners, maybe even competition to deliver something properly. And you're introducing something new and thus scary to your ultimate end customer who is writing the check at the end of the day. And so this focus, and I'll arguably say this incorrect focus, has been too much on the hardware, and we failed to see the opportunity to deliver a better software experience or a software-defined experience onto said hardware. And that right here is this new way. This is where the new AV as a service definition and thus adoption can truly shine. It's redefined and refocused on now that software-defined experience, a service and support and a license and a feature-defined experience. And it's focused now on those outcomes, which are extending lifetime value and increasing support options. And it's making finally the hardware that the amazing hardware manufacturers in this industry have been making for a long time, but finally making that hardware the worst it'll be on day one and only allowing it to get better. All because it's cloud connected, it's readily accessible, it's supported from anywhere, and these softwares and features and licenses, they are defined now for an optimal experience into the future. That is the true big differentiator. And last of all, before I hand it over to Thomas and Casey from Cliff to talk about how we actually accomplish this, is that regardless of who you are in this value chain, it is an all-win scenario. It's a win for the manufacturers, it's a win for the channel partners, and it's a win for the end users to deliver this software-defined experience. Because what it does, it ensures constant streams of data back to the manufacturer to enhance products. It increases profitability due to potentially lower SKU counts and greater service opportunities for channel partners and service providers. And even now the end user is finally now buying and consuming a product where everyone up the stream, the manufacturer and the channel partner, are incentivized to keep it always on, always up to date, and always secure. So, sounds easy, right? I mean, I think we can all agree, okay, Andrew, this all makes sense. But this is where now I want to introduce back to the stage, the virtual stage, Casey and Thomas from Cliff, who've actually done this before. They have worked with manufacturers and channel partners to truly implement and adopt this and finally use products that are outcomes focused. And now I want to bring them on to really discuss how this is done and start with the challenges with adoption. So Thomas, Casey, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Well, I think the first challenge that most of us here experienced in the past is the traditional remote access and monitoring systems over IP that requires deep network knowledge, starting to mess with static IPs, ports, etc. So this deep understanding has its own challenge in scalability. So not only the deep knowledge, but also dealing with the different security departments, with the IT departments. And let's say in the traditional way, a system was onboarded, is working, then how is it going to be managed? Because the visibility to what is happening to that network is not always there. And we know about it when something doesn't work, and then a deep dive needs to happen. So it's not scalable. It takes a lot of expertise to maintain a system like that. Cloud-based solution, of course, they are a lot more scalable. They are scalable, much easier to install the actual hardware components, basically a plug and play. However, it requires a robust network infrastructure and careful coordination between the cloud solution and the on-site hardware. What we see and what we recommend as a consultant is always, whenever you get into a new cycle, new product cycle, when you design new products, keep the cloud in mind from day one. What you want to communicate, what you want to push back. And the second thing, and it's as important, is security. Always keep security in mind. One thing I think this is something that we are seeing more and more is security threats that changes from these different attacks that can happen, different policies that are being implemented around the globe. So this hardware needs to be scalable on that side as well. So as these rules change, as these security requirements change, through a platform like Excite, you can push these new features down into the product, and your product is secure and is connected to the cloud.
Yeah, and I think, Thomas, you bring up a very interesting point about security as well, not just from a pushing the updates more seamlessly and, of course, quicker to patch any issues out there in the field, which cloud solutions can give you, but security as it relates to just cloud and data in general. It has actually, what I've seen in my conversations with some of the most secure enterprise network managers in the world, has kind of flipped on its head, where previously it was always, you know what? I can't adopt cloud solutions. I need everything on-prem. Cloud is not secure. We have seen it flip completely on our end, where we've seen now these large enterprise customers say, no. The cloud is way more secure when done properly, of course, right? That's the key thing. When done properly, way more secure than me just hosting information and data in some server closet in my basement. Because now what I'm relying on is just the front desk of my building. So what's really more secure? The cloud infrastructure that is behind the scenes run by Amazon and Microsoft and Google, or the server that you're creating on site that is really being managed by a lock and key from your front desk? That's been the big question that I've seen. And especially from this conversation, which I know we're going to get to with Casey in 1 second, is this concept of licensing and security around licensing. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who have agreed with what we're talking about, have started to deploy licensing models to AV equipment in the field, but deliver that license through email, through a hard just mail, literally a letter in the mail. And yet at the same time, we'll talk about the importance of security, but fail to realize that when delivering that license over a potentially non-secure email or potentially just a true letter in the mail, fail to realize the actual security implications of that, which is way less secure than a robust SOC 2 Type 2 certified cloud delivery method, which you can get from, say, someone like Excite. And so I think, Casey, this is probably a great time to bring you on and now talk a little bit more about this licensing concept and the different models that are out there for people to implement.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. And before we move into the different licensing models, I just want to tag on to that conversation. We've seen that too, and it represents a real watershed moment because, as you mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's been a lot of talk as blank as a service, whatever industry as a service, but there has been historic resistance to the idea of security in the cloud. However, now that we're really in that second phase where the as a service concept has evolved, people like Excite have invested tens of millions of dollars into it. Companies like HP GreenLake, we've done some work with them. They have that focus that manufacturers really cannot. So they're focused on compliance, they're focused on security. And what we have now, platforms like Excite have the ability to bring the level of security up to a place where it's more trustworthy, in my opinion, than just about anything else. So just wanted to throw that out there. We have run into some of that resistance as well, but over the past 2 years, we've noticed the mindset beginning to shift, and that's very, very welcome. So bringing back to licensing models, there are a few different ones that we'll talk about today, a few different options that manufacturers certainly can take advantage of. First is Perpetual, and just like it sounds, it is a one-time CapEx expenditure, and that means that you own the software indefinitely. Typical uses in AV would be with AV control systems, media servers, and a real-life example of this is installing a video wall control system in a museum for long-term use. And we found that a lot of times entities with governmental budgets, we all know, I think, they are typically locked into a very strict budgetary cycle. So they tend to like perpetual licenses for that reason. They can sink the cost and move on. Next, something we are all familiar with, thank you, YouTube and Amazon Prime, subscription models. Key features, recurring payments. Again, we all know about those. And that often includes updates and support, which we'll talk about in a little while. That can also be another recurring revenue stream for manufacturers and dealers. Typical uses in AV, cloud-based services like Zoom that we're taking advantage of today. Moving on. Timed, just as it sounds, licensing for a fixed period. And this really can come to life in the AV space through event management, temporary AV setups in conferences, event productions, concerts, etc. And then the last, usage-based, just like it sounds, where you pay for what you're using. And these are really popular with events, short-term events, live streaming events, good examples of usage-based licenses. So in the course, as Andrew said, of us working with our clients to implement Excite, we've been able to identify some really good housekeeping best practices for license management. And we've tailored some of these to the AV space, but really they come down to what I would consider just good hygiene and just good rules for living, frankly. It's pretty straightforward, but exactly the sort of thing that when you're transforming your industry into the digital space can easily get forgotten about. So the very first one, centralizing your license tracking, extremely important and mitigates a lot of change management stress in an organization. And this I liken to having a bowl to set your keys in when you come in through the front door of your house. You can just throw them in, not have to worry about it. You know where those keys are at all times. Auditing and reviewing your usage regularly. This is extremely important, and what we've found a lot of organizations don't tend to think about as they move into the digital space. Conducting periodic audits to identify underutilized licenses. And the key benefit there is that doing that and monitoring that license usage regularly will help you liberate resources that you can apply to other things in your core innovation platform. Automating license management, that is a big area in which Excite can help. Using software tools to automate tracking and set renewal reminders. And again, that seems like kind of a no-brainer thing, but we all have very busy lives, a lot to manage. You wouldn't believe how many times we have to remind people to set reminders. And then optimizing procurement, and this is another area in which liberating resources from automation can really help drive efficiency. Consolidating purchases and negotiating with vendors for better deals. And then going back to the compliance question, ensuring compliance. understanding license terms and reinforcing usage limits and making sure that that knowledge is filtered down through your entire organization. Again, should be simple, but often overlooked, planning for renewals and upgrades, making sure that you're on top of that renewal schedule and that you understand where the utilization of the licenses is being applied. And again, that will allow you to negotiate long-term for better pricing overall.
And Casey, I'll pause here for 1 second because I think this is an interesting one where I think first off, not only is it, a great user experience to be able to be proactively reminded and updated about, hey, look, your license is about to expire. It's time to get onto this and maybe upgrade or renew it before you lose that feature or your product maybe is turned off, whatever the license is that you have. But let's not forget also from the manufacturing standpoint, this is a huge revenue generator for you guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is found money. And it's somewhat new in this space, but I can tell you in my experience working directly with manufacturers and channel partners, right? Because it depends on who's kind of on the hook for managing these different licenses, deploying them, servicing, supporting them. But this is something that is always forgotten about and is typically lost, but yet is such a great opportunity for you to get back into that customer to ensure that they are upgrading to the newest thing, right? So incentivizing, the customer is incentivized to want to keep these things running and working properly or getting an upgrade when possible, but also for you to generate and regenerate this revenue. And monetization of the cloud, monetization of licensing, understanding what your ROI is when even using a license management tool is always a question that I get. And I think this point right here is one to really hammer home as well, here's how. You're gonna pay for a license management tool, but this is exactly where you start to pay back the usage of the said tool.
Right, and I think that's also a good place to just go back to that win-win-win conversation we were talking about earlier. Predictive maintenance is something that Thomas and I have been so excited about. We see that as a win-win-win for everybody, and customer service, as we all have found in our very busy lives, often tends to suffer. With a platform like Excite, it's so exciting to be able to support your customers preemptively, and that becomes its own self-maintaining revenue stream as well, because the incentive is there to keep a long-term relationship, and you are spending less money overall dispatching somebody on site to check out problems when they arise. It's just smoother for everybody and much more economically sound for manufacturers, certainly. Managing end-of-life software, again, just another hygiene, data hygiene practice, really, that is good to apply across the board. Tracking software life cycles and then planning those upgrades very carefully. And leveraging cloud licensing for scalability. That's what this all really comes down to, is how can we all scale to meet the market needs that are coming. And I think the statistic is that 74 or 77% of all original equipment manufacturers by 2030 are going to be cloud-based, and Excite can really support that. And then training staff on policies. And from a change management perspective, this is often a lot to bite off, but you can break it down into smaller chunks and start with license usage and compliance, ensuring your teams understand both of those topics, the licensing rules, the licensing guidelines, and the internal guidelines and policies around those licensing tools.
And I'll say something here too, Casey. We're working with a partner of Excite's that's using our tool to deploy licensing to devices out there in the field, and adding on to train staff on policies. I'll also say it's training your salespeople or informing and educating your salespeople on the incredible opportunity to deliver commissionable sales and quota achieving sales through licenses, and not just having to sell hardware. I mean, look, I'm a career sales guy. I can tell you, when I used to, own specific accounts, what an awesome opportunity I would jump at for the ability to go to my customer who had just sold a piece of hardware to, and then re-talk to that customer about how I can make that hardware better. I can renew the licenses and features onto that device, constantly giving me a reason, not just to bring cookies and coffee to that customer, but actually bring value to them now, and ideally value back to myself, right? To make money, hit quota, and receive commission. I mean, it is duly incentivized for me to bring value to that customer, and that customer to then, of course, do increase business with me. And that can only happen if you're not just training your internal technical staff or operational staff, but also, of course, don't forget about your salespeople and your marketing people to actually deliver revenue generating opportunities through licensing.
Oh, that's such a great point. And from a marketing perspective specifically, that gives you a new story to tell at all times. That gives you a new value prop at all times. So I don't think there's a more exciting model, frankly. And then lastly, aligning licensing with growth. And we've talked a lot about scalability. We've talked about liberating resources and keeping your innovation process clean. This will allow you to do that. You can scale licenses based on organizational needs solely, so that everything is really well scoped and you've got those resources to put into the next iteration.
This is super helpful, Casey and Tom. Thank you for putting together these best practices, because I think from a takeaway is, at least from this section, as we move into now application, is I would highly recommend any of the manufacturers in the audience today, dealers, resellers, integrators in the audience, these 10 points, these 10 steps in deploying, really launching, managing, and iterating on a true licensing model to deliver better value and outcomes within your products or your service offering down to your customers. Like, take these 10 and just apply them to your business or retranslate them into your business, because these are generic best practices. But I can tell you, I have seen a lot of manufacturing channel partners miss one or two, and things start to fall apart. All 10 of these are so key to implementing. And I've seen, of course, firsthand, even just Casey and Thomas, going through these best practices with manufacturers, with resellers, to ensure that when they say, hey, I need to generate new revenue, or I need to find ways to beat the competition, or I need to give my salespeople reasons to go back to existing customers and sell them something new without having to rip and replace hardware, these best practices in deploying licensed tools are exactly the best thing that you can do to doing it properly and actually seeing those outcomes when reviewing this webinar. So just a reminder to highlight these 2 slides, guys. Go back to them, read through them, and if you do have questions on any of these, please do reach out to us, as we'll talk about contacts in a second. But Casey and Thomas, why don't we get into the streamlining and now simplifying, because we understood the best practices and we understand the why of what we're doing, and of course, great examples of some of the different licensing models. But I think instead of me telling the audience of what can be done to streamline and simplify, I think we'd love to hear it from you both.
Sure. I can take it first and then pass off to Thomas. I'm going to cheerlead a little bit here because we have just been so impressed by Excite. The deep focus on real scalability and usability. Going back to one of the first slides, thinking about AV as a service where it was even 3 or 4 years ago, it was really in the 1.0 stage. And Excite, we've done market study, wide competitive research, and we feel so strongly that Excite has done the work to be the leading platform for cloudifying devices and really bringing digital transformation from a usability perspective to a wide variety of industries. And for AV, it can certainly be that.
I think we lost Casey right at the punchline. But Thomas, I'll let you wrap up her thought then on that one.
Well, maybe if we move on to the next part.
Oh, I think she's back. Casey, you back with us?
Yeah, sorry, that was that 16.6 connection I've got. Yeah, just short form is that we've we've done a lot of research, and we stand behind Excite 100% as the company, the platform to bring the AV industry, certainly, and many other industries forward where they really need to be.
Amazing. Well, we appreciate that, Casey. And obviously we share that sentiment, not just from, a sales and business perspective, but in truly looking at this industry and helping move it forward and digitally transforming everything and partnering with companies to help them do so. That's really the goal here. And instead of, not just hearing from Casey or Thomas or myself, the last thing I do want to do for the audience is take everything we've said and really boil it down to, I think, a really applicable case study that was just launched at InfoComm this year in June from a company called Symmetrix. And if you haven't heard about Symmetrix, I highly recommend checking them out. They are one of the industry leaders in offering high quality audio and audio distribution and DSPs and amplifiers. They are the audio experts in this world. And they came to me a couple of years ago and had the exact same questions and problems that we addressed in the beginning, and wanted to follow a best practices approach to generating aftermarket sales opportunity, and most importantly, bringing greater value, not just to themselves, not just to their resellers who support their customers, but the customers, the end user themselves, through licensing and a software-defined experience. So let me just play this quick video for you all. I think Quinn does a much better job explaining it than I.
We're just now starting to get into field upgradability, giving end users, giving customers the ability to get a system and upgrade it. So Excite was a really good platform for us to start building out just a location for people to find that store and really easily pick out the upgrades they want for their products. And the eStore is a platform that we've designed with Excite that gives us a lot of flexibility on the types of products, the types of upgrades that we can offer to customers, so that in the future, being software-based, we can design and come out with new features that we can then bring directly to the customers. Simply said, the more cloud control you have, the less trucks you have to roll out, the less people you have to have on the ground. So having that cloud monitoring platform gives you ability to not only be able to make changes to the system, but be able to see changes, see anything that might go wrong ahead of time. So troubleshooting time gets taken down from a day to 10 minutes kind of thing.
So I think one key takeaway before I go to the next case study that I want Cliff to talk about with a customer that they've been working on is, what Symmetrix looked at was, hey, I clearly have this opportunity to deliver a software-defined experience to my customers. I clearly want to focus on licensing and aftermarket sales. But the key thing they did well was they recognized that they needed to build a strong foundation first. And that foundation was a centralized, cloud-based device management portal. And it was that portal, that true Symmetrix cloud, that allowed them now to branch off and deliver via these best practices all those incredible wins that Quinn just talked about. So don't look at it just as a license management tool, but first build the foundation so that you can then deliver a license management tool through the cloud down to your end customers for a much better experience. And Symmetrix isn't just the only one in this AV space, but I think, Thomas and Casey, you guys are also working with a certain customer that all had similar thoughts in mind as well, right?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Absolutely. We're currently working on a project with a major European manufacturer for intercoms in the MDU, multi-dwelling unit space. Traditional hardware and sheet metal shop that builds products. Products are built, installed at the premise with some servers on premise, and the classical situations don't actually know where they're installed, hard to maintain, hard to update. So we're helping them to transition their products and cloudify them so that the seamless connection can actually happen through the Excite platform. But there's a lot more to that. It brings immediate visibility of the state of the products. Are they working 100%? Is there issues possibly with the backup batteries? What can happen? So it's predicting situations that could happen, so that a system engineer from the outside can take a look and take care of a potential problem before the problem occurs. Clarity of where the installations are, so truly understand where they are connected geographically, and also usage. What is the usage around those systems? So a lot of valuable information that is coming back. But what Excite also offers here is not only on this OEM level, but also distribution and integration. And each level, let's call it the e-store, has the capability of adding their own services there. So their additional added values, either training, additional components that are needed, can be placed into that platform without the distributor, without the integrator doing the heavy lifting and investment in creating that space. That space is being provided on the XI platform through the OEM, through those different layers. And as Andrew mentioned before, and Casey mentioned before, is everybody gets their piece out of that equation. So what it actually does, it's a long binding partnership that is built on all those levels. And finally, an end user satisfaction. One thing I would like to mention at this point is we are looking at the whole situation, not just from a technical standpoint to adapt the products. It's two things that need to happen in parallel in our experience. One thing is the adaptation of the products and cloudifying these products, but it's also a cultural change and a cultural transformation we are working on within those organizations, because the mindset is we're stamping metal, we're making products, we're shipping products. And now there's different dimension coming to the equation that helps the organization to grow and make everybody in the organization understand what this means and what this means to the company and what it means to them individually. But it's a transition, it's a technical and it's a cultural transformation that is happening in these cases.
Yes, that's such a good point. And sorry, just to tag on to that as well. This is enabling them to take advantage of operating like a software company in the cloud environment, however, not having to sink the costs into becoming a software company. And that's part of that whole cultural mindset shift that we're seeing.
That's a great point. You finally, in this world, allowing manufacturers to focus on what they do best while still transforming their business for the better for the future. And it's a really unique scenario here, and we're just proud that we're able to really build and support this new cloud standard that's going to deliver things like this that we talked about today. This one piece of the puzzle in license management and aftermarket sales. So we are just at about time, and I can't thank obviously Thomas and Casey enough for walking us through that. However, we did have a couple questions, so I did want to spend just a couple minutes addressing a few of the questions that came through. And really, one of the first ones I want to bring up to both Casey and Thomas was a question came through saying, I'm getting a ton of questions and pressure around generating recurring revenue for my executives. How can licensing and licensing models support this recurring revenue push? So Casey, Thomas?
Sure, I can jump in on that one. The first thing that comes to mind, and again, this is a great topic to support what we were just talking about being able to think and operate like a software company without having to be a software company. And that is taking advantage of renewals and upgrades. We all, again, have experience with being on the customer end of that. One of the great revenue streams that we see that executives really like is that renewal and upgrade system where it's an extra $2.99 a month. It's an extra $9.99 a month, but you get that at volume, and all of a sudden you have a real growth trajectory with just that one revenue stream. In addition to that, subscription feature add-ons are a big one, and that also goes back to thinking and being able to operate like a software company. Feature-based add-ons. Thomas, any you'd like to add?
I have a thought to that, and usually when I come from the engineering side is working with equipment that you're comfortable with. So it's the trust that's first, and we feel that if you work with a piece of hardware that you trust and does the job that you need it to do, That's the first step. But very often you want to maybe experiment with an additional feature. You want to experiment and test out something else, but don't want to do the heavy lifting, the heavy investment. So this allows now to say we have a standard hardware, all the features are baked in. The core product offers you exactly what you need, but you have the opportunity by usage or time to experiment. And if you like it, well, you can expand on that. If you don't like it, you need something else, you try something else. An example, for example, is in the machining industry, CNC, a computer numeric controlled milling machine, for example, that does a job for production, but has all these extra features that you typically don't need. But if you want to start to play with it, you turn them on, you try them out, and possibly you like it, and then you purchase it for a longer period of time or as long as you need it for a job. So that's what I think is the trust, building that trust and giving the user the capabilities to experiment. And in our experience, it's a lot of people then just build from there and grow the needs. That's reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, the trials or freemium approach, I think, is so valuable. Sorry, Casey, you have something to add to that?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Just something, an exciting path for recurring revenue that's a bit more indirect that we have not covered so far is one that Thomas brought to my attention when we were talking with the manufacturer we discussed earlier in the initial stages of the digital transformation, and that was keeping refurbished equipment and third-party, I'm going to use the word parasites, out of the market. So you, as a manufacturer, this really allows you to control your devices all throughout the value chain and the visibility to be retained throughout the value chain. So that can indirectly become its own revenue stream because you're controlling those sales down to the nth degree and keeping those third parties away from the space.
It's a great point, right? You know, when you, I was talking to a colleague of mine, when you have to rip and replace, you open yourself up for replacement, right? So
Yep.
it's probably the biggest takeaway I can offer to manufacturers is stop forcing your customers to have to replace your gear for the next iteration, the next box. Rather keep that box installed and simply make it better through software, and then you won't be replaced from them. So I think we have time for one last question. For the others, we will make sure that we answer those and send them in the recording. But I think this is back to you, Casey and Thomas, and it's around training and support. And the question was, what kind of recommendations do you have for training and support for some of our channel partners to explain how these different licensing offerings can be deployed or managed and involve themselves?
Thomas, would you like to take that one or shall I?
Casey?
Well, again, the first thing that comes to mind is certification program, if one is not already set up. We have seen great things with our clients who do have certification programs. And what this model really gives you, as we were talking about earlier, from a marketing perspective, and this also applies to training, is the ability to continue offering value propositions, not only to your customers, but to your dealers, and infuse that into the training materials. So I think that would be my top recommendation for training, just thinking of it as another marketing channel, which it is, and keeping a conversation going about the new features and the new discoveries that you're having, and infusing that through the training materials and program.
Very good point, Casey. I think that's what Excite platform also offers to build those training programs around that. You keep track of who is trained, what is trained, but the individuals who were trained can always go back to the same spot and find their questions, find their answers, find their video training material, what it is. I think that's one of the critical key components I see in the field, that people say, oh, where is that? Where do I find that? Where do I find the information? And I think we all struggle with that. But here again, it's one platform, one location. All the partners can go back, they get trained, they find the information, and work through that one platform, the one location.
In this case, it's a good idea to have all your eggs in one basket.
I love it. Well, Casey, Thomas, I can't thank you both enough for this. For those in the audience that do want to reach out to us and find out maybe a little bit more, have further questions, please reach out to either of us via email. You also see my LinkedIn up there in case you guys want to continue this conversation, because I truly do find this very interesting. You know, hopefully the audience, and for those that maybe will watch this recording, I know for sure that you are probably asking yourselves, or have been asked by your boss or your manager or execs in some way or another, how can we generate more business? How can we generate more revenue? How can we support our customers better? How can we beat the competition? And hopefully this is one very small but easy way to begin answering that question. And finally, a way that does not disrupt, but rather empowers the value chain all the way from you down through your channel to your customer. And I think this is a great example of how to do that successfully. So really can't thank you guys enough, Casey and Thomas, for joining us today, for providing your insight, because, you know, it's one thing from Excite to provide the tool, but for you guys to offer your experience, your implementation, your training, and really your true just knowledge from doing this with manufacturers and your real world kind of feedback on what works and what doesn't, that is the key, right? Because a tool is only as great as the person that can use it. And I think what you guys can offer to every manufacturer that has joined us today, and for those that are watching the recording, is just that, someone to really talk through how to do this properly. So thank you both a great bunch for joining us and sharing that insight, but also thank you all for joining us on the webinar today. Again, if you have any questions, comments, the recording will be sent to you if you've signed up, but also please do remember to reach out to us, and both us at Excite and Casey and Thomas at Cliff really hope to work with you all in the future on finally transforming your business from delivering products to finally delivering outcomes. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.